T. The jet looked like a silver bird waiting to fly. Only rich businessmen and VIP guests usually came here. Everyone inside the showroom wore clean suits, shiny watches, and polished shoes. It was a place where money spoke before people did. But on this surprising morning, something different happened. The glass door of the showroom opened slowly, and a man walked inside. His clothes were dusty, his boots were old, his hands were rough, like he worked in fields every day. His jacket had mud on it, and his face looked tired from years of hard work under the sun. His name was John Miller, a black farmer from a small town far away. He did not look like the kind of man who bought jets. He did not look like he belonged in this place at all. Everyone in the showroom stopped what they were doing. Some people pretended not to look, but their eyes followed him. Some whispered. Some frowned. Some even laughed softly behind their hands. A tall security guard stepped forward immediately. His eyes were full of suspicion. He moved like someone protecting something expensive from someone who didn't deserve to touch it. "Excuse me?" The guard said in a hard voice, "This area is for customers only." John looked directly at him. His voice was calm and polite. "I am a customer." The guard almost smiled, not a friendly smile, but the kind that says, "I don't believe you." He crossed his arms, blocking John's path at the other side of the showroom. A salesman with shiny hair and a perfect suit noticed the scene. His name was Richard. He loved selling jets because every sale made him richer. He walked over quickly, not because he wanted to help John, but because he was afraid John might make the showroom look cheap. "Yes. Can I help you?" Richard asked, but his tone was not respectful. His eyes scanned John from head to toe, judging every detail. "This area is for high-value buyers," he added sharply. John ignored the insult. He pointed at the shiny silver jet behind Richard. "I want to know about that jet," John said. "I want to see its features." Richard almost choked on his own breath. "That jet," he repeated loudly so others could hear. "Sir, that jet costs millions of dollars." People nearby began whispering more loudly now. One woman shook her head. A businessman smirked. Someone even pulled out a phone, ready to record a scene they thought would be funny. John didn't care about their looks. He kept his calm face. "Yes," he said simply. "I know how much it costs." Richard's smile became cruel. "Well, I'm not sure you understand. This is not a shop for random visitors." He paused and added with a fake smile, "You should maybe visit the public airport. They have seats you can afford." The words were sharp and humiliating, but John did not react. His eyes stayed gentle but firm. He was a man who had spent his whole life fighting storms, racism, poverty, and endless difficulties. A rich salesman's insults could not break him. "I am interested in this jet," he repeated. "Please show me the details." Richard rolled his eyes. "Security," he said loudly. "Please help this gentleman find his way out." The guard stepped closer to John, placing a hand near his shoulder. People watched like it was a show. Some smiled cruelly. Some waited for John to get angry. They expected him to shout, argue, or leave in shame. But John simply stood still. He looked at the jet again. He admired it like a man looking at a dream he had waited years to touch. Number? Fear. No anger. Just deep, quiet strength. Narrator tone. No one in the showroom knew the truth about this man. They saw only his clothes, not his journey. They saw only his boots, not the miles he had walked. They saw only his skin, not the storms he had survived. And then something strange happened. A young assistant entered the showroom carrying a pile of documents. His name was Thomas. He was new, nervous, and still learning the business. When he looked up, his eyes widened with surprise. He whispered to another staff member, "Wait, is that John Miller?" The same John Miller from Miller Farms, but no one heard him yet. Everyone was too busy watching John like he was a stranger who didn't belong in their world. Meanwhile, John stood quietly in the middle of the shiny showroom, surrounded by whispering mouths, judging eyes, and cruel smiles. But he did not bend. He did not break. He just waited, and the story was only beginning while the showroom buzzed with quiet judgment. Far away in John Miller's heart lay a story no one in that room knew. A story made of struggle, strength, and silent victories. A story that did not shine on the outside but burned bright inside him. John was born in a small wooden house on the edge of a dry, forgotten town. His family did not have money, land, or power. What they had was hope and hard work. His mother worked day and night, washing clothes for rich families who never remembered her name. His father woke before sunrise and returned after sunset. Working on other people's farms, he taught John one lesson every day. Son, never think you are less than anyone. Not because of your clothes, not because of your skin, not because of your past. Stand tall, even when no one sees your worth. John carried these words like a shield through his entire life. As a young boy, he loved the soil. When he touched it, he felt peace. When he planted seeds, he felt hope. When he saw plants grow, he felt proud. But there was one more thing. He learned early racism. At school, some children refused to sit with him. Some teachers ignored him. Even shopkeepers watched him like he would steal something. These small daily cuts hurt him deeply. But his mother always wiped his tears and said, "Let them think small, you think big." And John did. He grew up dreaming of owning his own farm. A farm where no one could shout at him. A farm where he could breathe freely. But dreams are not enough. He needed money. And money was something he never had. So he started with the only things he owned: 2 hands and courage. He worked on farms during the day and washed dishes in diners at night. While other boys played or slept, John carried bags of seed and cleaned muddy stalls. People laughed and said, "A farmer? Him? Impossible. He will never make it. He should know his place." But the more they tried to push him down, the more he rose. Every dollar he earned went into a small yellow box he kept under his bed. Years passed, and the box only grew heavier, not with money, but with belief. One day, after many years, John finally bought a small piece of land. It was dry, cracked, and looked useless. Neighbors laughed. He bought a dead field. Nothing grows there. What a waste. But John was not just buying land. He was buying freedom. He worked on the land every day, sunrise to midnight. When rain didn't come, he carried water on his shoulders. When storms came, he rebuilt what was destroyed. When seeds failed, he tried again. Slowly, green returned to the dead land. Slowly, hope grew with the crops. Slowly, word spread about the hard-working black farmer who refused to give up. He expanded from 1 field to 2, then 2 to 5, then 5 to a huge farm. Supermarkets began buying his crops in bulk. His organic vegetables became famous. Soon, his farm, Miller Farms, supplied 2 cities across the state. Reporters wrote articles about him. Businessmen wanted to partner with him. But even after becoming a millionaire, John did not change his life. He still wore old boots, still lived in a simple house, still drove his old truck. Why? Because his father taught him, if you stay humble, God stays with you. That is why the man standing in the jet showroom did not look rich. He never tried to look rich. He tried to look real, but the people in the showroom did not know his story. They did not know the nights he slept hungry. They did not know the insults he swallowed growing up. They did not know how many times life tried to break him, All they saw was a farmer with dusty clothes. And yet, behind those clothes stood a man who had turned broken soil into gold. Back in the showroom, John stood, calmly waiting for someone to treat him like a human being. His face showed no anger, only patience. The kind of patience that comes from years of fighting silent battles. Thomas, the young assistant, kept staring at John from a distance. His hands shook a little. How could these people not know who he is? He whispered to himself. How could they talk to him like that? As Thomas watched, he remembered an article he had read just 2 weeks earlier, titled, "The Black Farmer Who Built an Empire from Dust." The photo in the article looked exactly like the man now being insulted. And suddenly, Thomas felt fear not for John, but for the salesman who had spoken so cruelly. Something big was about to happen. Something no one in that showroom expected. Something that would flip the entire room upside down. John, the quiet man with dusty boots, was standing on the edge of a moment that would reveal everything. The calm before the storm. The jet showroom grew strangely quiet, almost like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The bright lights still shone on the beautiful silver jet. But now the real attention was on one man, the dusty black farmer standing calmly in the middle of the polished floor, John Miller. People did not whisper as softly as before. Their whispers had become louder, sharper, and more disrespectful. A few guests even pretended to turn away, but their eyes stayed glued to him, watching every small movement he made. To them, John looked like a joke. To John, this was just another day in a life full of challenges. The security guard stood closer now, blocking him like a wall made of muscle and arrogance. Richard the salesman stood beside the guard with fake confidence, as if he were protecting something rare and precious. Richard pointed at John's boots. "These shoes," he said loudly, "do not belong in a place like this." A small group of businessmen chuckled. A woman covered her smile with her hand. Someone whispered, "Maybe he walked in here by mistake." John's eyes dropped for a moment, not in shame, but in memory. His father once told him, "People will judge your clothes before they judge your character." And today, the words felt painfully true. "I want to see the jet," John repeated softly. Richard raised his eyebrows. "The jet, the private jet. Sir, do you even understand what you're asking for? This is not a tractor. This is not a second-hand machine. This is the top-class executive jet used by billionaires." He said billionaires like it was a word that John was not allowed to speak. John calmly looked at him. "I know what it is. Now show me the inside." A new wave of laughter spread across the room like a slow poison. It wasn't loud laughter. It was worse. The kind of silent, disrespectful laughter that cuts deeper than words. Richard leaned closer with a cold smile. "Listen," he whispered, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I can show you the inside, but first, show me your bank statement." Everyone nearby looked thrilled now. This was entertainment for them. John did not move. He did not shout. He did not insult back. He simply said, "I asked for respect, not approval." Richard's smile faded for a second. But pride is a strange thing. It makes people blind. "Oh, respect." Richard repeated mockingly. "You want respect? Then dress like someone who can buy a jet, not like someone who fixes fences." The words were harsh. John's jaw tightened, but he stayed still, like a mountain standing in a storm. The security guard stepped forward. "Sir, please leave before we involve the police." The word police echoed in the showroom like a warning, like a reminder of the world's unfairness. Thomas, the young assistant, stood frozen. His heart beat fast. He knew exactly who John was. He knew John could buy 10 jets if he wanted. 2. But he also knew something else. John didn't like to embarrass people. John didn't like to show off, but right now, John was being pushed too far. Richard walked toward the jet stairs and touched the door handle proudly. "Let me explain something very simple," he said loudly. "This jet is for businessmen, celebrities, leaders, not for farmers." John lifted his head slowly, his eyes strong but calm. He took a step forward, not with anger, but with quiet dignity. "When you insult a farmer," he said softly, "you insult the soil that feeds you." The entire room fell silent. For a moment, you could hear only the soft hum of the lights above. Even the guard felt a sudden wave of embarrassment. Though he would never admit it. Richard tried to laugh, but his voice cracked a little. "Well, that was poetic," he said bitterly. "But words don't buy jets." John looked at the jet. Again his dream, shining just a few steps away. Then he looked at Richard, whose pride was bigger than his knowledge. Then at the guard, who still stood stiff and confused. And then something unexpected happened. A small girl, the daughter of a rich customer, walked up to John. She tugged lightly at his jacket sleeve and whispered, "Sir, you look kind. Are they being mean to you?" Her innocent voice sliced through the tension like a sharp arrow. People turned away, embarrassed. John smiled gently at the little girl. "Sometimes," he said, "people don't understand what they can't see." The girl nodded like she understood more than all the adults in the room. Richard felt the shift. He needed control again. He snapped his fingers at the guard. "That's enough," Richard shouted. "Escort this man out. He is disturbing our real customers." The guard placed a hand on John's arm. But before he could move, John even won. Step Thomas shouted from across the room, "Stop! Don't touch him!" Everyone turned. Their eyes widened. Something big was about to be revealed. Something that would change every face in that room, and for the first time since John entered the showroom. The humiliation shifted not toward him, but toward the people who had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The room fell into sudden silence so sharp it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. Thomas's voice had cut through the showroom like lightning. Every head turned toward him. The young assistant stood there, holding a folder against his chest, his hands shaking, his breath uneven, but his eyes full of something stronger than fear-respect. "Don't touch him," Thomas repeated, louder this time. "Do not lay a hand on this man." Richard's face twisted with irritation. "What is wrong with you, Thomas?" he snapped. "Oh, this man is not," but Thomas didn't let him finish. He stepped forward quickly, each step louder than the last, his shoes echoing across the polished floor. "You're making a mistake," Thomas said. "A very big mistake." The security guard lowered his hand from John's arm, unsure now, confused by Thomas's unusual panic. Everyone watched closely now. The humiliation no longer entertained them. Now they smelled drama, danger, truth. Thomas reached Richard out. Of breath, he opened the folder in his hands and pulled out a printed article. A photograph on the page showed a man standing proudly on a large farm surrounded by green fields. The same man who stood in front of them now, wearing dusty boots. Thomas held the picture up like evidence in a courtroom. "This," he said, "is John Miller." Richard laughed sarcastically. "Yes, I can see that." "He looks exactly like—" "No," Thomas interrupted. "You don't understand." His voice grew stronger, louder, filled with intensity that surprised even him. "This is the John Miller, the owner of Miller Farms, the man who built one of the largest organic farm businesses in the state, the man who supplies vegetables to 5 supermarket chains, including the company that owns this showroom." The room gasped so loudly it sounded like wind slamming against windows. Richard froze mid-smile. His face turned pale, then gray, then almost green. The security guard's hands fell to his sides. Customers who had once whispered insults now stared wide, their mouths slightly open. John stood quietly, his calm face unchanged, but the whole showroom felt like it had. Tilted sideways, Thomas continued, his voice steady now. He is a millionaire, and not just any millionaire. He is the man who built everything from nothing. He is the man who created jobs for hundreds of workers. He is the man who changed the farming industry. He stepped closer to John, almost protectively. And you, Thomas said, turning to Richard, insulted him. Because of his clothes. Richard swallowed hard. His perfect suit suddenly felt too tight. Sweat appeared on his forehead, even though the room was cool. I didn't know, he stammered. You should have said. John finally spoke. Why? He asked quietly. Why should I say who I am? Why should I prove myself before? You give respect. His voice wasn't loud, but it was powerful, the kind of voice that makes people look down in shame. John turned his eyes toward the customers who had laughed earlier. You saw my boots and decided my worth. He pointed at his jacket. You saw dust and forgot your manners. No one dared to breathe. No one asked my name, John said softly. No one asked my story. You simply judged me. His words hit the crowd harder than a slap. Thomas, standing beside him, looked proud of this moment. Proud of this truth, proud that he spoke up when everyone stayed silent. For the first time in the showroom, the little girl who had spoken to John earlier stepped forward again. She tugged her father's sleeve and whispered loudly, Daddy, didn't you buy vegetables from Miller Farms last week? Her father looked embarrassed and nodded. Everyone now felt the same heat. The burning shame of their own assumptions. Richard tried to recover himself. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Well, Mr. Miller, please accept my apology. Let us show you the jet now. I will personally. John raised his hand gently, stopping him. I do not want your jet, he said calmly. The words landed like thunder. Richard blinked. What? What do you mean? John turned to Thomas. Thank you, he said. You didn't need to defend me, but you did. That shows your character. Thomas lowered his eyes, emotional. Then John looked back at Richard, straight into his eyes. You tried to push me out before you even knew who I was. You judged me before I spoke a single word. That tells your character. Richard felt a wave of humiliation crash into him so hard he almost stumbled. John walked toward the glass exit door slowly. As he passed the crowd, people moved aside without being asked. They made a path for him not out of fear, but out of respect. But before leaving, John turned slightly and spoke one last line. I came here to buy a jet, but now I will buy it from someone who knows how to treat people. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind silence, leaving behind regret, leaving behind a lesson the showroom would never forget. Thomas watched him go with deep admiration. Something told him the story was far from over. John stepped out of the showroom, and the cold morning air touched his face like a gentle reminder of freedom. Behind him, the large glass doors slowly closed, trapping all the judgment, shame, and noise inside. Outside, everything felt calmer, quieter, cleaner. But the moment was not over. Richard, the salesman, rushed out after him, his footsteps fast and desperate. Mr. Miller, please, please. Wait. John stopped, but he didn't turn around. Richard finally reached him, breathing heavily, trying to gather himself. I made a mistake, he said. A terrible mistake. I didn't know who you were. John slowly turned, his eyes steady, not angry, but disappointed. Your mistake, John said calmly, wasn't that you didn't know who I was. Your mistake was thinking I had to be someone important before you treated me with respect. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. Behind Richard, staff members peeked through the glass, watching the scene unfold like scared children who knew they had misbehaved. Even the security guard stood nervously by the door, unsure if he should come forward or disappear. John continued, his voice soft but cutting deeper than any shout could. You judged me for what I wore, for how I looked, for my skin. You thought you could measure a man's worth by his boots and jacket. Richard lowered his head. Mr. Miller, I truly apologize. I was wrong, completely wrong. If you give me another chance, I will. John raised his hand slightly, stopping him. Respect, he said, is not something you give only when someone can benefit you. It should be given to everyone. Richard blinked quickly, trying to hold back embarrassment. John walked a few steps, then stopped again. When I was young, he said, I saw my father get insulted for wearing dirty clothes after a long day of work. The same people who ate the food he planted treated him like nothing. His voice grew quieter. I told myself if I ever became successful, I would never let pride blind me the way it blinds others. Richard felt something heavy settle in his chest. This man, this farmer, had more class in his silence than Richard had in all his expensive suits. John continued walking toward his old truck. It looked out of place in front of the luxury showroom, like a soldier standing among glass towers. Thomas came running outside, holding a small envelope. Sir, Mr. Miller, he called. John turned, and his face softened when he saw the young assistant. Thomas reached him, slightly out of breath. I just wanted to say thank you for standing up for yourself and for teaching them a lesson. John smiled gently. You stood up first, he said. You reminded them that kindness still exists. Thomas looked down shyly. I only did what was right, sir. That, John replied, is something rare. Richard walked forward, nervous and desperate to repair the damage. Mr. Miller, please come back inside. Let me show you the jet. I can offer you a discount, a better package. John shook his head with a slow, firm motion. You cannot buy back respect with discounts, he said. Richard felt his face burn. Thomas looked between them, unsure if he should stay or step away. John then placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. You have a good future, John said kindly. Don't let places like this change your heart. Thomas nodded, feeling something warm spread in his chest, pride, hope, and a feeling of being seen. John turned to Richard one last time. You had a chance to treat a stranger with dignity, he said softly. You lost that chance. Then, he added, with a quiet voice that carried more weight than any shout, I forgive you, but I will not do business with you. Those words hit Richard harder than any insult. John opened the door of his old truck. Its seat was torn, the steering wheel worn, the engine old but to him. It was a symbol of his journey. Before he got in, he looked back at the showroom. Customers inside stared at him with guilt. Some lowered their eyes. Some whispered regrets. But John simply nodded once, like a man who had no hate left in his heart. For years, John said softly to Thomas, I dreamed of owning a jet. But now I know not every dream belongs in every place. Thomas felt emotional, his eyes slightly wet. Where will you go now? He asked. John smiled, confident smile. To someone who sees people, not outfits. And with that, John started his old truck. The engine coughed, then growled to life. It was not elegant, not beautiful, not impressive, but it was honest. As he drove away, something beautiful happened. People in the showroom stepped outside, watching him go. One woman whispered, we treated him so badly. A man said, I wish I had stopped Richard. And someone added quietly, we all judged him. In that moment, the lesson became bigger than the jet. It became a mirror showing everyone who they really were. And John, he didn't look back. He didn't need their approval. He had already won. John's old truck rolled down the long airport road, leaving behind the shiny showroom that had treated him like dust. But the humiliation did not break him. Every turn of the wheels reminded him of something his father once said: "When people push you down, rise in a higher place." And today, that higher place was waiting just a few buildings away. At the end of the road stood another jet company, a little smaller, a little less fancy. But something about it felt right. The building had simple glass windows, no gold signs, no luxury cars parked outside. Instead, there were a few workers moving parts, technicians in uniforms, and a humble front desk. It looked like a place where people worked, not performed. John parked his truck and stepped out. This time, no one stared. No one whispered. Number 1 judged. A receptionist sitting behind a small wooden desk looked up and smiled. "Good morning, sir," she said warmly. "How may I help you today?" Her voice carried something that had been missing all morning: respect. John nodded politely. "I would like to know if you have private jets available." Her smile widened. "Of course. Please have a seat for a moment. I will call our head consultant." John sat down, feeling something unusual comfort. He didn't have to prove anything. He didn't have to explain himself. He was just a person in a normal room, being treated like a human within seconds. A friendly-looking man with gray hair approached him. "Good morning, sir," he said with a handshake. "My name is Daniel. You're interested in a jet?" "Yes," John replied. "I want to see one with good range and strong engine performance." Daniel nodded with genuine respect. "Absolutely. Let me show you our top model. It's right outside." John followed him through a side door. The jet was not as shiny or massive as the one he saw earlier, but it had something better. It felt honest. It felt like a machine built with care. Daniel opened the door of the jet and said, "Please, step inside." Inside, the seats were soft, the cabin smelled new, and the windows gave a beautiful view of the sky. John walked through each aisle, touching the walls, imagining the fields he would fly over, imagining the freedom he would feel. Daniel watched him, not with judgment, but with curiosity. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking," he said gently, "what inspired you to buy a jet?" John smiled softly. "My farm grew bigger than I ever expected. I travel a lot now, to suppliers, to markets, to clients. A jet would save me time, and time is something you cannot grow in a field." Daniel laughed kindly. "That is true, sir. I must say, your story sounds inspiring." John didn't brag. He didn't list his achievements. He simply nodded. "I try to keep life simple," he said. Daniel admired the answer. They stepped out of the jet, and Daniel handed John a brochure. "We can discuss pricing inside," he said. "We offer full transparency and no pressure." John liked that. No pressure, no fake smiles, no arrogance. He followed Daniel back toward the office. But as they walked, something unexpected happened. A black luxury car stopped in front of the building. The door opened. It was Richard. He had chased John all the way to the second showroom. His hair was messy from rushing. His suit was wrinkled. His face carried panic. "Mr. Miller," Richard shouted, "please, please wait." Daniel looked confused. John stayed calm. Richard ran toward them, breathless. "Mr. Miller, please, I beg you, come back. I didn't mean to insult you. My job, my career, my reputation, everything is at risk." Daniel stepped between them respectfully. "Sir, is everything all right?" John nodded slowly. "This man works at the first showroom," he explained. "He judged me. He insulted me." Daniel stiffened, his expression turning cold. He looked at Richard with sharp disappointment. Richard continued, desperate. "Mr. Miller, I can offer you any price you want, a huge discount. A personal membership, just please come back. John stood silently. The wind blew softly, making his old jacket flutter. He did not raise his voice, did not look angry. He simply said 4 words, "I've made my choice." Those words broke Richard completely. He fell to his knees on the pavement. "Please, Mr. Miller, I'm begging you, don't ruin my career. I didn't know who you were." John looked down at him, not with hate, but with truth. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said softly. "You needed to know who you were, Richard." "Froze," John continued. "In your world, respect was for the rich. In my world, respect is for everyone." Daniel placed a supportive hand on John's shoulder. "Mr. Miller," he said, "we would be honored to work with you." John smiled. Richard remained kneeling, broken, defeated, realizing his arrogance had destroyed his chance. John walked with Daniel into the office, leaving behind the man who once laughed at him. He wasn't just buying a jet now. He was buying dignity, and that was priceless. The second showroom was quiet, but filled with a peaceful energy that felt almost sacred. When John walked in with Daniel, workers stopped their tasks for a moment, not to stare, not to judge, but simply out of respect for a customer. A different kind of silence. A good silence. Daniel guided John to a small meeting room. Nothing in the room was fancy, just a wooden table, 4 chairs, and a window with a view of the runway. But this simplicity felt more valuable than all the gold decorations. "In the first showroom, please, take your time," Daniel said kindly. John sat down. For a moment, he didn't speak. He looked out the window at the empty sky, thinking about the long road that had brought him here from poor farmland to a place where he could buy a jet. Not to show off, not to impress anyone, but to save time. Time he would spend with his workers, his land, and his dreams. Daniel placed a small folder in front of him. "Mr. Miller, this is the final offer. No hidden costs. No tricks, just honesty." John appreciated that. He opened the folder, read every line carefully, and then closed it. "Yes," he said softly, "I will buy this jet." Daniel smiled. Proudly, not because he made a sale, but because he felt he was part of something meaningful. "Thank you, sir," he said. "We are honored." John nodded. He didn't show excitement, but inside his heart something warm bloomed like a new seed breaking through soil. As they filled out the paperwork, a small group of workers stood near the door. One of them, a middle-aged woman with oil stains on. Her hands cleared her throat shyly. "Sir, congratulations," she said. John turned and smiled kindly. "Thank you." Another man, a technician with tired eyes, added, "You deserve it. Hard work always wins." John's chest tightened, not from sadness, but from gratitude. These people understood him more in 2 minutes than the fancy showroom did in 10. A few hours later, the sun slowly moved down the sky, painting the runway in gold. The jet John had just bought stood proudly outside, ready to touch the clouds. For the first time under its new owner, Daniel escorted him toward it. "You're welcome to take your first flight today," he said softly. John touched the side of the jet gently. Like a man touching a dream he once thought impossible. But before entering, he turned around. Richard stood at a distance, not kneeling anymore, not begging, just watching silently, his face filled with regret. He must have stayed there all day. Or maybe he came back again, hoping for forgiveness, hoping John would change his mind. John looked at him not with anger, not with pride, but with a kind of quiet understanding. Richard slowly walked forward. He stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Miller," he said in a broken voice, "I am truly sorry." John nodded. "I forgave you earlier," he said. "I hold no hate." Richard looked shocked. "You Forgave me? Yes, John replied. I forgive you because carrying hate is too heavy for the heart. But forgiveness, he paused and looked into Richard's eyes, does not mean I forget the lesson. Richard lowered his head again, but this time not in shame, this time in respect. John continued. You judged me because I wore old boots. But these boots carried me through storms. You judged me because of dirt on my jacket. But this dirt helped grow food for thousands. Respect is not about clothes. It is about character. Richard's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for teaching me something I should have known long ago. John placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. It is never too late to change, he said softly.